Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
Namaste viewers, welcome to Jaipur Dialogue USA. And today we are going to talk about, as you see, politics of critical race theory. The critical race theory is much in news, much in conversation, and it seems to be following a remarkable social agenda, cultural agenda, spiritual agenda for everybody. But just to give you a quick reference to that, the critical race theory is an explicitly left-wing movement inspired by an Italian neo-Marxist, Antonio Gramsci, in which he had stated that the material conditions are primary, material conditions and improvements in the lives of people who are victims of critical race scenario is key to everything else. While the civil rights and brought about some symbolic changes in the way cases were fought, the way equality was established, but it did not change the material conditions of people. And that's what is important. And, to discuss this, I will straight away dive into this with Mr. Aditya Satsangi ji. Welcome to the show. And welcome to the show. And this is important because it is forming a conversation in the United States and globally. As the saying goes, whatever happens in America becomes a global challenge, is a global issue. And it is very important for us to know, and I want to talk about it in the backdrop of what impact and implication it has for India. Because while in the US, it is about the Black Lives Movement, which is where it took the shape and the roots for, because that's where they were not treated equally, the right to be equal of opportunity and everything else, where the minorities were victims of the race scenario, the white supremacy and the white impositions. Whereas in India, we have suffered the tyranny of the minorities, right? Think about it for a moment. If the same theory were applied to fix social sufferings of Hindus, which are a majority in the country, in India, you will find that if that particular fixing begins to happen in India, it will be a global outcry that the majority nationalists are doing to minorities. Whereas in the US, it is just different. So there is a very important part here, which I wanted to emphasize, that there was some very nice statement I had read, that academicians may have very interesting theoretical descriptions of the various forms of governance, whether it's monarchy, democracy, socialism, communism, call it any which way. But it is always a small coterie of people who have the ambition to gather power, who have the ambition and ability to manage things. They are the ones who actually control the government. So go ahead, make my day, shoot away. But before that, I want to request all the viewers of Jaipur Dialogue USA to support, subscribe, like, and share our channel, YouTube channel, in addition to Jaipur Dialogue in India. And don't do either or, support both. Thank you very much. Go ahead, sir.
So, first of all, thanks for the introduction about the origins of critical race theory. But in US, one name comes in, Derek Bell. And Derek Bell is the one, these are the legal experts. They were finding out solutions that how the racial relationships, especially for the Native Americans and Native African Americans who had come to this country, and they were mistreated. And so Derek Bell was a professor at Harvard Law School. He's the first one to create a legal framework for critical race theory. Now, what it means is that they created a series of laws, and there were series of discussions they started, where they started to define what critical race theory means for the Americans. Now, it includes, first of all, removing racial terms and including removing racial, any kind of racial overtones based on the skin color. And third thing is legal equality. You know very well that the percentage of people who are oftentimes prosecuted by the legal system in the US are generally in the non-white population, a huge number. And it was seen in Mississippi, Tennessee, and states which have significant black population. So if you look at the amount of cases or legal issues that are resolved or were attempted to be answered by this critical race theory has been related to those minority communities in the US. Now, in the US, the minority is defined based on race, not by religion. Religion is not come into place. So, racial inequality led to critical race theory. In some ways, now our spin to that is something else, because the critical race theory, even though it is defined by the race, we as Hindus are branded as brown Caucasians. Can you imagine that? Now, Caucasian is a part of North Iran. So we are called North Iranian or Aryan race, which is also considered on par with the whites. And this is a very clever ploy they have done. For some people, they're applying the skin color as the basis of racial segregation. For some others, they are not. So, like, we do not fall into the category of oppressed class, because, and so now the important factor comes out that the our religion becomes immaterial here in the US. That if you are a Hindu, you are automatically considered out of this critical race theory framework. So, in a way, I will say that the blacks, the Native Americans, and these lawmakers, I would say the theorists, academics, have very cleverly singled us out. So now, if you, from our perspective, if you try to understand, then critical race theory doesn't matter from the point of view of Indian Americans. Now, it has become a biggest attack on the white Americans or the Caucasian Americans who came from Europe to this country, especially European settlers. Now, if there has been a record of the violence done by the European settlers against the Native Americans and the slave trade, which flourished until the 18th century from Africa to here. And it started from 15th century, it ended in almost 19th century. The slave trade was going on. Now, if you look at the overall impact on India, now which you look at from Indian perspective, critical race theory is irrelevant to India because in India suffered from critical faith theory. Race is immaterial to us because if you look at a Mumbai or Northeast person or a South Indian, it doesn't matter. Our DNA is 100% same, 100%, not even 10% difference, 100% same DNA. Color of the skin doesn't define who is an Indian. It's actually the Sanatana Dharma, which is spread all over India, defines that. It is a common connection. Now, the US is the conservatives are rattled by critical race theory while Democrats are supporting it. The reason it is happening because the critical race theory works against a particular race of people only. And because it is designed by one particular race to work against another critical race. Now, these things have been taken over by Native Americans, have been taken over by the black African Americans, and black is a wrong word to say, but African American origin people. The point which they want to drive is that they want to ultimately get justice for all the past which has happened. Now, I'll give you one example of injustice which has happened, that the most of the Native Americans were pushed into reservations, which is like a open jail. You cannot come out of it, plus you do not have the rights, you don't have the paperwork of the land. So even today, more than 800,000 Americans, voting age Americans, people who can vote, do not have the rights for adult franchise because they cannot access a polling booth. And that's what people are fighting for.
That's very fascinating because the color, you have eliminated the color part of it so far as we are concerned, right? But we are also 1.6 billion people, 1.3 billion people. And, whatever happens in America begins to rattle our side of the world as well. As you know now, the critical race theory in America, they are now talking about one of the biggest clashes today is about the caste being caste-based nomenclature definitions of divisions in India. You know, caste-based, and that has been adopted here too. It is getting adopted. Santa Clara and other places, they have begun to bring about caste-based thing, and there is conversation going on, and we can't deny it. How do we contest that entire thing? Because this entire caste thing is not originally Hindu based. It is all of us know now, we have talked about it several times. It is a Portuguese word, casta, right? So the question here is very simple, is that how do we as people contest that? Because we are attacked, vilified, as if we have a racial problem defined by caste. Whereas you right now mentioned that we have no racism in our land. So this is critical race theory is not relevant to us. But there is an impact and implication of this discussion which has relevance in the other side. So if we want to achieve what I prefer to call elevated equilibrium in this discussion, how do we change that narrative? It's very key, because we also know that many of our writers, I mean, I don't want to name anything, but you know that many Shudras were great authors and they have achieved greater significance. So Varna, at what point in time did Varna get deformed and caste got established? And what must we do to confirm and deny and reject that critical race theory does not apply to us, even if you include caste into that hodgepodge?
Now, the word caste has been used by the church against Native Americans also.
And just one thing here. The Native Americans have been pushed in reservations, whereas we are using the word reservations for economic amelioration and upliftment of the people who were denied material privilege, who missed out on material privilege in India because of certain suppressions.
See, most of the Indian media and analysts do not understand Americans. Sometimes I was commenting on another show that they don't understand English properly. Like when I was listening to Rajiv Sardesai talking with Sampath, and he kept on saying, "Let's be honest." Well, we are supposed to be honest all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you don't have to. That's why I wrote on Facebook that after people say, "Let's be honest," the garbage begins,
Yes,
because
right.
that's what they want to say. They want to say their own opinion. So most of the Indians do not understand. Analysts do not understand. They normally speak Hudson or American academic language. Now, if you understand the word caste has been used by European settlers against Native Americans and also against the blacks. They said that it is a superior casta or the nobility. Most of the 21 missions in California, which were the first California West Coast missions, on the East Coast, they started from Canada down, and it's all in my new book also, Gold, Glory, and God. And on the West Coast, they started from San Diego and went north up, Junipero Serra, the most barbaric guy, the most barbaric. And if you look at the history of American history, if you look at it, the past presidents like Andrew Jackson, Ulysses Grant, like they were the worst abusers of human rights. You have more than 1,000 quotes of the US Army officials who have taken pride in destroying Native American communities. Now, with the critical race theory, now these people have gotten a voice. Now here the left has worked in favor of genuinely oppressed people. Now, the genuinely oppressed people are the Native Americans and the Black African Americans who suffered the scars of the slave trade. Now, in the case of India, if you see, it doesn't apply, but I'm sure it will be brought in India in some form or the other in the academic circles, and especially if in those universities who are affiliated to American universities. Like if somebody is affiliated to Berkeley University, they're already working on a project to translate critical race theory for India. They're already working on it, and they've been working on it for last 3 years. It's going to be launched next year. And so the left in India will get energized, and people do not understand generally that the left in the US is anti-church, but the left in India is anti-people. There is two different things totally. One is against an institution, another is against people, because they cannot, in India, the Hindus are not organized around a single entity. But in the West, whether you are a Protestant or a Catholic or a Lutheran or Presbyterian or any other church person or even a mosque, you are all aligned on an institution. Now, so they have a target to achieve. But in India, they have no target to achieve. So they go after everyone and they'll go after everyone there. Now, the Democrat Party included casteism of India in their national charter. Now, the reason why they added was on the pressures of the left and also the Islamic lobbies, and particularly Indian American Muslim Council. See, no American will pay attention to India generally because they view India as a friendly country because of Hindus. But the Indian American Muslim Council forces its way to include this kind of agenda in the Democrat Party. Now, from our point of view, as an academic point of view, or from the political point of view, we have to also understand what is the reason behind CRT, why the CRT was invented in the first place. And if you, like I said to you in my private conversation with you, that there is CRT is an euphemism to hide something worse. And that's the whole the topic of this discussion is that the critical faith theory, which was being used to colonize North America and Australia and New Zealand, is the actual cause behind critical race theory. But they want to hide it because they don't want to say that it's a religion is the main factor. But if you look at all the tweets, all the messages of prominent people or low level politicians or high level politicians from the conservative side and even from the liberal side will support CRT, but everywhere the faith comes first. Faith comes first. So if you, so it's a what you call it, the opposition to CRT in the US is the church and followers of the church, and the proponents of CRT are the people who are against the church or people who want to diminish the role of church. And Muslims have joined the other side of it to oppose the church, and they're using CRT for their own benefit.
No, that's it. Eventually, it is all about gaining and garnering and capturing political power. It's all about power. It's a power game. You use certain instruments to attain power and control power. So you refer to the Marxists and communists in India. The one thing which bothers me that while Berkeley is doing this study, how to make CRT relevant in the Indian context, what are Hindus doing about it? Are we so sleepy? Are we in denial that we don't see these bleeding obvious events being manipulated against us? So look at it this way. Vijayan, a Hindu name, in Kerala, who is a Marxist chief minister, made a bizarre statement saying that in the recent capture of Shiva temple and other temples in Kerala, he said that Hindu temples are public properties, whereas the church and mosques are private properties. So here is a Marxist, communist, talking about private property. My question to him is, and I'm going to ask him that question in a tweet after this show, is that in that case, as a communist, shouldn't you nationalize the private properties, right? So this is where the contradiction comes in, and that's where I keep saying that we have to begin asking questions. We have to begin questioning the validity of the statements made by politicians. So I tweeted in the morning today that we have a bizarre scenario in India where theories are being used, religious part. That's why I believe that critical race theory is an instrument of capturing power, and it has a lot to be driven by the faith element. So think about it like this. In India, Stalin in Tamil Nadu, Jagan in Andhra Pradesh, Vijayan in Kerala, Channi in Punjab, Northeast. You have, Arvind Kejriwal in Delhi. All of them are Hindu names, but they are all anti-Hindu. It's an amazing twist of destiny in India. That these people have either converted or they're pushing the theory that supporting the victims and the minorities, so to say. How does one address that challenge? I mean,
No,
this is very important for us to come to the conclusion about that. And as I say that, I have my favorite phrase is that if you are where you are, And if you want to achieve elevated equilibrium, then you have to challenge the assumptions and the validity of issues that is holding you where you are. And you have to uplift it, you have to change it, you have to elevate it. Then only we can make a shift. Your thoughts?
So first of all, when he says it's a public property, then why not the whole Kerala public should be invited to the Hindu temple? It's a public faith then. So
Right.
then all the Kerala people should be Hindus first, because it's a public property.
Right.
And then the church and the mosque becomes a private religion, only for few people. It should not be a state religion. So I think he's debunking himself in the first place. He's contradicting himself. Secondly, you mentioned about the other Indian politicians. Now you know and I know very well that never give mic to a politician. He's going to take away the whole time from everyone else. In India, the wrong people are given the public place. And in India, there is no dedicated media for the people who think common sense, who like people who are thinkers. They hardly get a viewpoint. There in America, there's a reverse also true. That in America, even though critical race theory is promoted by the left, but the right wing or the conservatives, I'll call it, conservatives also have a major voice in the national say. In India, there is no such thing. And the second thing is, if we would like to say, there is so much violence against Hindus in Kerala and Kashmir, and they're being singled out for their faith. Nobody is talking about it. People talk about minority, people talk about, so the whole minority majority concept in India is wrong. It should never be faith based in a country like India. So the minority should be a person who is working against the state. That should be the minority, or the whatever the classification is.
No, wait. You said minority is a person who is working against the state?
No, according to the classical definition,
Okay.
ideally,
Okay.
minority should be the people like the we need to change the definitions of minority majority in India.
Right.
Now, if you look at the minority and majority in the US, it's based on the race theory. In India, the race theory is not applicable, and therefore they apply the concepts of minority and majority on the basis of faith in India. I think that definition needs to be changed. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Because that definition based on faith is not a good criterion for the country as a whole. So,
That's true. That's very true because that's what is important. You wanted to say something on that?
so ideally, the minority and majority should be defined in terms of the like the like according to me is should be based on who is working against the state and who is working for the state, because in India the faith you cannot discuss, because India is regarded as a secular society by the constitution which was changed in 1979, and India is not a race based society also. The race theory was being applied with the Aryan invasion theory, but it has been rejected by many people. So the reclassification of this has to take place. In fact, the minority majority concept in India should be purely political guided, not in terms of either race or faith, because the political affiliation should define that. But the concepts are incorrectly applied, because like I said in the beginning, that they don't understand English. There's one thing you understand, the denotation, another thing is connotation, what actually means. So like, for example, in America, conservative means church going people, clearly. Liberal means people who may not be interested in a church based lifestyle. That is the meaning of liberal and conservatives in the US. So in India, it's totally different. So if you transport the ideas from US to India without any translation in the middle, then you end up what the mess in Indian universities have got now.
Talking about the mess in the Indian universities, the education part plays a very critical role. And in this scenario, it is virtually fashionable. It's a culture of being fashionable, to become a communist, to abuse freedoms, to sacrifice and being a hero in Bollywood. These are the kind of things where we have got into a habit. It's a very interesting observation. Is that in Bollywood, what is promoted? The hero is always weeping, crying, and always speaking of the poor. Whether you meant it or not doesn't matter. All the actors are multimillionaires, living a very wealthy life. But in the role they will perform is talk about against establishment, वो अमीर है, अपने खिलाफ में बोलेंगे वो,
Mhm.
लेकिन दिखाएंगे कुछ और. So there is, and the media and the movies have a way to impress the gullible, the soft mind, or people get carried away. It's very important that we have to somewhere along the line fix that so-called culture, which is promoted in Bollywood in the name of whatever. So it is very critical for us to do that part of it. And it is important that unless and until you, like you said, minority majority concept in India has to change. The biggest joke is Kashmir, which is 99% Muslim. It's a minority. Minority is the Muslims are called minority there. How does one really fix that? Because you have Mamta Banerjee and others political things who are Mahagadbandhan, Mahathagbandhan as I call it. They are manipulating the entire narrative there, and the media is with them too. So how does one protect? How does an ordinary Hindu who has never been a fighter, who has never been an oppressor, who has always experienced oppression, who looks upon to the leader to do everything. So Modi must do everything. I don't want to do anything. He must do everything, right? The challenge is, how does an individual get inspired? Because it's very important, as Sanatana Gita says, that individual as well as collective both have to make their effort to change the circumstances that you are in. Go ahead.
So, first of all, you talked about media, and generally, the media is based on emotions. All media in the entire world, and that is the true with Hollywood also. If you ask any conservative in the US, and they will hate the American media. You just ask anyone, they'll hate Hollywood. They would hate see, the world. Rest of the world is inspired now, and so Hollywood ends up producing movies like Destruction of US Cities, and talking about many movies are there. Tom Hanks challenging Da Vinci Code, challenging the Christian thought, and questioning Mary Magdalene, whether she was a wife or a daughter or a girlfriend of Jesus. Now all these things they do, which really destroy the faith of many of the conservatives. They hate them like anything. It's like a plague for them. Now in India, it's totally reverse of it. In India, the media taunts the majority of the people. In Hollywood, they don't taunt the majority of the people. They produce their own theories, and they make movies on those theories, but literally trying to bring out a challenging viewpoint. In India, the media is used to preach about Islamic values to the Hindus. It's used as a conversion tool, and to promote. It's totally like in India, everything gets distorted. So whatever is in the West, in India, it comes out worse. Just like the left and the right, all worse philosophies have originated in France, and the French exported all of them to the US, and so US is suffering from French philosophies. They may not buy French technology, but they have imported all French philosophies. In India, everything comes from either US or UK, and everything is like a colonial implant to
Oh,
make Hindus weaker. And the distortion is, you and I are laughing. The
yeah.
distortion is so much, and when you hear Indian analysts talking, and I'm talking about big people like Rahul Kaval and Rajiv Sardesai, you just understand that how these are the most idiotic people sitting in the media and telling us about what America happens using American terms. And so if an American hears it, and you and I are very well read, we understand what's going on. But when we hear these guys, we know what an idiot. Totally. Like it totally they miss the mark. So the point which I'm trying to say is that the Indian translation, mistranslation of American philosophy comes on the deep misunderstanding. And the only way we can remove it is by developing our own. Instead of copying them, we need to develop our own. Like democracy, we all know, you and I know, that democracy was meant to put Native Americans into minority and then to put a European settler government. And that's what democracy meant for. In India, the system is Lokatantra is completely different. Lokatantra is not democracy. Lokatantra is not based on popular vote, because popular votes can be easily manipulated. And Americans got a first taste of it in 2016, and they got second time in 2020, and they will continue to do that. And I'm telling you, in next 20 years, they're going to change the form of American government. I'm sure about it, because the people who are on the losing side are not very happy, and they are the major churches of North America.
Well, if they are not happy, they have to do something. And
They
that's
will
what
do.
we refer to the colonial part of it. And we see that in the colonial mindset of us desis hasn't gone yet. We have been shamed. We have our internalized cultural and ethnic inferiority has been so implanted in us that we have begun to believe that we have begun to believe that we are inferior. द होल थिंग वो कहते हैं हिंदी में घूट घूट के इतना पिलाया है कि हमें वो सम्मान ही नहीं है, आत्मसम्मान नहीं है. That's what is important. This is very, very important for us to know that colonial mindset must go. But as you said, Stanford is doing a research how to implement CRT in India. We are always reacting. Where is the proactive element in us? Have we done our Purva Paksha? Do we know the nature of the beast that we are dealing with? That's what is critical for us to move forward, because in every sense of the colonialism, we have been made diminutive characters. We have been made to feel inferior. Discrimination installed kar diya hai, which is in the name of caste and whatever, which was not there, because we were always a community of what you did. They also have it. The blacksmith, the goldsmith, all the smiths are there. They were all part of an occupation. Likewise, in India also, it was what you did was what defined you, but it got all classified as a caste element. How does the Indian mindset evolve from the colonial slavery that we are stuck with, that we still look to the West for validation? Log kya kahenge? What will the West say? Whereas in reality, in today's world, Sanatana Dharma is remarkably relevant with the advents of science and technology. We know that sun means one for everybody. Why are we defensive about it? Where will the offense come in our dealing with this scenario? Who will lead that? We have a crisis of leadership. You have classic case here, Subramaniam Swamy and Narendra Modi ji. Yes, Subramanian Swamy is now leading a band to discredit him for whatever he does. And the people who supported Modi are discrediting for whatever he has achieved. He has done great, but he has not done XYZ, or he is not doing ABC. That's the crisis that we suffer from, that we can't tolerate or accept the functioning of the leadership. And we have done a lot of work on leadership. So this is an issue that the satrap mentality that we suffer from, how do we get out of that?
No, you made some very valid points on the leadership crisis that Hindus face. Let me tell you, like, people who follow the Sanatana Dharma culture properly, they always have a leader. Sanatana Dharma is the only natural culture of the world based on Vedic scriptures which produces leaders, real leaders. In fact, most of the American thinkers like Mark Twain and many other thinkers, they've always commented on Bhagavad Gita as a source of ultimate spiritual guidance. Now, when you talk about dharma, the dharma has a very important component of it, which is called varnashram. And so Sanatana Dharma has always been produced good leaders. The problem today is that Macaulay has been very successful, Max Muller has been very successful. They have infused the dharmic teachings with the Christian words. Like, for example, simply a Dashera became a fight of good over evil. Now in Sanatana Dharma, there is neither good nor evil. Sanatana Dharma, there is no permanent hell, there is no permanent heaven. So when we speak English language and we do not understand where the words or where the English language originates, we naturally import Sanatan Christianity into Sanatana Dharma. And therefore, wherever, if you look at the colonial history, if you look at South America looks up to the colonial countries, colonial masters, and says, please give us leadership. Even though Mexico is more rich than Spain today, but still they look to Spain for guidance. In India, the same thing has happened with the brown Angraj or the coconuts, like who look up to Britain or the European philosophies. They will read more European books because that's what their bread and butter is, and every one of them makes money off of that. Like if you look at, I'll give one very simple example. That recently there is a reporter from Kashmir. He reports, he's paid by the Turkish media to report from ground situation in Kashmir. So he always speaks the Turkish viewpoint because he gets money from there. Similarly, most of the English speaking schools and colleges in India speak in the language of the church. They may be telling Hinduism to you, but they are actually speaking from the language of the church. Like, for example, we always say that if the snake has touched a milk, don't drink that milk because that milk is poisonous. It may look white, but it is poisonous. Now, that has exactly happened with our Sanatana Dharma culture. Now, you and I, when we are speaking, we are translating Sanskrit is the processor and we are speaking in English. So our speaking English is actually bringing out Sanskrit. So our, even though we are using their language, colonial language, and we're recording the show in Hindi, it's a live show in English, but still we are taking out the Sanskrit words or Hindi words in English. Now, if you look at the rest of the Indian education system, and this time when I visited India, I traveled far and wide. I was shocked to see that even in the small villages, they are talking about sin. Now, sin as a word doesn't exist in Sanatana Dharma. There is no permanent pap. Pap is only for an action, and when you can atone it, you can improve on it, and there is no eternal hell. So narak permanent nahi hota hai. Narak is for small time only, based on the punishment or bad actions you have done.
Right.
So we have, as a whole, in trying to compete with the West, we have tried to first become like the West, and then we lose everything. I'll tell you one very good example. China has banned both Quran and Bible based on the history. Both Quran and Bible cannot be taught in China. And they have created their own version of Quran, their own version of Bible. I've been giving that suggestion for last 5 years. And I just recently find out I was not the first person to give the suggestion. Actually, China has already done it. They have removed the word kafir from all the Quran that they have. There's no kafir in China now. So they have no infidel in China. Even though church is going there, but there's no word infidel over there. So they have protected their own culture. Same as with Japan. They protected their own culture. India, we have a very wrong notion. There's a song in Hindi. सारी दुनिया का बोझ हम उठाते हैं, लोग आते हैं चले जाते हैं. That is the biggest problem with Hindus. They think that they want to apply dharma to everybody else. But dharma is only for magnanimous people, not for everybody else. Everyone else has to be made understood through a stick. उसको डंडे का जरूरत है. They've forgotten about it. Then they talk about सहनशीलता. Tell me one thing. You do सहनशीलता for the weather. ठंडा है तो गर्म कपड़े पहन लो, गर्म है तो कपड़े लाइट कपड़े पहनो, गर्मी है तो ज्यादा. But that is not applied to human beings. Human beings, the concept is respect. Suppose if I were to tell you, I'm tolerating you, Vibhuti ji, and you will not like me for the rest of my life because that's a very negative word. And we talk about in public. Let's tolerate the other religion. Why should we tolerate when we can respect?
Right.
And the respect is mutual. Toleration is one-sided. There is a difference in the two. Tolerance is one-sided, respect is mutual.
You
So
you have said it very correctly, because this is my favorite thing that I talk to my American friends and others, that we must replace the word tolerance with respect for everybody. Respect is the word, which means a lot. Acceptance is the word, that you accept everybody the way they are. That's the important part for us. And you talked about retaining the cultural identity. Is that like the Japanese, the Chinese have retained their culture? They have a beautiful article written by Sri Aurobindo. The article is titled Bourgeois and the Samurai. He wrote it in 1907. And I would urge everybody who is listening to us today or will listen to us in future to read that article. It's mind-boggling. Written 100 years ago, I mean 1907. It is so relevant even today. And if you want to change, then it begins with us. And retaining the cultural identity is key for all of us here. So going forward, what behavioral changes we need to have to effect an actual change. Because we all live in every idea that lives in the mind can be functional only with the body adopts it. It's called a somatic experience. So just like we cannot become a good driver by reading the driver manual, we don't become a swimmer by watching somebody else swim. We don't become a tennis player because I'm wearing Federer or Nadal's uniform, and I can't become a golfer unless and until I go and practice in the golfing range. So the change that will happen will have to begin from a behavioral change. So here is an example. Recently, just a few days ago, while ISKCON temples were demolished in Bangladesh, whereas ISKCON people were offering food on Eid and other festivals, they retaliate by destroying our temples. How does one address that challenge? That you are trying to be good while they are coming to cut your throat. What behavioral shift Hindus need to make in themselves, that the concept of Atiti Devo Bhava, the guy who is coming to slit your throat, is not your Atiti. Understand that. You know, this is what is important for us to understand, to apply the concept of non-violence. Whatever we know has to be applied properly, and that will come with a behavioral shift. When and where does that behavioral shift must take place amongst Hindus? And I'm being very specific about it.
Now, these are the same ISKCON temples who organize iftar also.
Yes.
And they organize iftars, and all the temples, ISKCON temples which organize iftars, were gifted with this behavior. So like, you never invite a snake to your house. You keep the snake outside. And I'm not calling anyone snake, but I'm just giving an example, analogy.
That is
Now,
the nature of the beast, which I always say that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the problem with the Hindu identity is generally, and I'm talking from purely from politics. First of all, we need to reject all Western authors or Western studies, Western researches. Few researches you can take, at least in science area, but rest of the political theories, political information, and stop talking to us. See, America exported democracy to India. Literally, India, the government function in India is also an import. Now this government has started at least calling that we are the world's oldest lokatantra. So there is a difference between lokatantra and democracy. Now we need to understand, and also the Indian rishis, our great sadhus, they have given us great philosophies on in every single aspect, whether it's a diplomacy, science, culture, arts, and music. We need to develop our own and quote our own philosophies. And there is a lot of hue and cry about Savarkar. Savarkar is just one such person who is repeating what is happening. There are other numerous people. The traditions of India, they're still alive. There are almost 250 million Hindus who follow a tradition, and those people, they never become colonial mindset. They're hugely successful. They retain originality of ideas, and they are the ones whom the West respects. Look at the followership of those saints and gurus, traditional saints who are respected in the West. You come to where I live, there are a lot of American Hindu families, and they are regularly reading Bhagavad Gita. Their SSR Foundation is located in Carlsbad here, and they are regularly part of that culture. So we have to first of all reject all the Western philosophies and stop using and being proud of trying to become more American than even Americans. So the Americans are rejecting their culture. They're gradually moving to yoga, meditation, and other things, and where Indians are adopting more. Now that cultural change has to come. Second aspect is diplomacy. Now the West recognizes only one word, and that is negotiation, nothing else. They know you take from the left hand and give from the right hand, or take from the right hand, give from the left hand. Now, if I give one example of Chinese philosophy, when Chinese came to the US and whenever they negotiate with the US accused them of human rights violations in Hong Kong. Chinese told them that what you have done to Native Americans is nothing. As compared to us, what you're doing, you have done much worse than that. There was no answer from the Biden administration. Biden administration had no answer to give to the Chinese. See, the negotiation they are using dharma. Now I'm telling you another example. Narad Muni tells Yudhishthir that put your soldiers, it's on my book, The Making of a Statesman, put your soldiers on the border and put your soldier families on the border. You should always expand your boundaries and you should always try to take something from your border state whenever you can. This Narad Muni telling Yudhishthir. China is following that. And I said, what happened to you Indians? This is what your previous guru has already told. But we are all have become leftist trained. So just understand one thing. After the real colonialism has ended, the West has already colonized India through their academic system. So for West, the left is a great help to colonize further India because the left keeps India in instability. So left is used by the West, exported by the West, and given to India to be used in India to make it weaker day by day. Now, when we are going to stop it? When we stop de-recognizing American universities. Like for example, if India passes a resolution, Indian Education Ministry, that we won't give visas to all the Indian students who are going to Harvard for Hindu studies. The Harvard Hindu department closes down. That's it. Now you have begun the work, actual work. If India says that we are going to refuse all the visas to students who are going to Berkeley because the Berkeley doesn't have a good course material. Berkeley's importance goes to drains because Berkeley has 37,000 Indian students, more than that. And all of them are being trained to become future Barkha. I'm guaranteeing you for that. You send I met an Indian American family recently, and her daughter works for studies in Berkeley. She said, I don't know what has happened to my daughter. She was so pro-Hindu before. Now she wants to eat beef and she wants to do all kinds of things. And I said, yes, that's exactly Berkeley's. So if the Indian Education Ministry, which is always dormant and pretty much not dysfunctional, doesn't look into these different aspects, they don't act on it, what does Americans say? It's your government's responsibility. So like when I went to the Berkeley and many universities where we do programs, that why don't you change your education material? He said we follow the same curriculum as in India. Now it's a hen and an egg story again. They will change it when India changes it, and India will change it when the West changes it. So we are all stuck in a cycle. So the change has to begin at home. India is the home of Vedic knowledge. India is the home of Hindu culture. If their education ministry starts acting proactively, America will change for Hindus. And these are the major changes needed. I don't want Jaishankar to come and put on a tie and other places and just do huggy and say we have nice discussions. They mean nothing. Americans, it doesn't. You and I live here. It means nothing for them. Did you see a single instance of Jaishankar's visit covered in CNN or Fox News? I did not see anything.
That is the classic Indian challenge. I mean, it's not Jaishankar alone, in all his, with deference to him and his benefit of doubt to him. That has been the history of American Indian diplomacy. We are not covered. Even the big event in India is not covered. It's just a stream mention somewhere along the line. We are not an important country as a news item for America, nor are we living here making stories for to be covered by Fox and CNN. Let's take the blame where it belongs. Despite our supposed corporate achievements, intellectual achievements being liked by American media as the most favorite immigrant community here, and with all the virtues of being an immigrant community.
Because we make money for them. That's
we
why.
make money for them and we make money for ourselves, but we have done nothing to contribute to the American society. So coming to that behavioral shift, you address quite a few things. I was talking about it the other day. We don't study Kautilya's Arthashastra. I studied Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, right? We gave the world Kama Sutra. They call it sin, and they force you to live in perpetual sin rest of your life so that you are guilty, and leading a life full of guilt is the ultimate disservice to God. So every time you indulge in conjugal bliss, you say, God forgive me for I have sinned. What kind of defiance of God's creation is that? Sushruta did not need an FRCS degree, but we need it. So that academic equivalence that you are talking about, that there has to be a greater awareness by Indians coming to study here is all for a job, not for life. That's important for us to bear in mind. And as you rightly said, that Indian children coming here to study liberal arts is a lot of money wasted to be brainwashed to hate yourself, hate your country, hate your faith, and hate yourself permanently, and accept everything that is heaped on you, फोर्स्ड ऑन यू, घुला घुला के पिला दिया. वो मान गए, लेकिन जो अपना जो गुड था वो हमने उसको लिया ही नहीं उसके आगे. So point comes to the very simple element. We are not proactive nation. And this part has to come from the awareness in us Hindus that our Sanatana Dharma is the eternal way of life. And that needs to be propagated. We have not propagated that, neither in schools nor colleges. And that's what is important. How does that, coming to the close of the show, wanted to ask you, how does one take that baby step? Study your own texts, study your own material, question the validity of something. For example, I question the validity of the concept of freedom of religion. For us, it is a meaningless concept because we have always been respecting of anybody, pray or don't pray, who you pray, how many times you pray or don't pray at all. But eventually what you do defines you. आज भगवान की पूजा करके हमने 5 किलो गुलाब जामुन खा लिया तो फिर पता है कल कहाँ रहना है मुझे, राइट? या 5 किलो पनीर बटर खा लिया तो उसमें पता चलेगा क्या होने वाला है. That is what is important for us to understand. Taking the validity, questioning the validity. What happened to us that we are not able to do that? Why does such slavery of mind?
First of all, we have not focused on our own education system. Like you said, we are not. Most of us do not know how many chapters of Bhagavad Gita we have. We do not even know what is our book of governance. Now, that is one aspect. Second is institutional framework, like I was referring to earlier. Now, the West is built on conquest through military and through institutions. It is the work. Now, the only country for Hindus is India. And most of the media outlets that we produce is leftist, which is Western. Leftist means Western or pro-church or pro-Abrahamic faith. Literally, that means. Left is not without religion in the US. Left is with the religion in the US. And I will take that definition as more realistic. India is a very hodgepodge. Everything is very confused. Like if you look at the India, most of the people, now we have good authors coming out, people who are talking really good sense. But generally, we have not seen the Indian original viewpoint in the popular media. Indian original viewpoint is in the secondary traditional media. Now that education has to be brought forward. There are great teachers today. I know some of the great teachers in Bangalore, in Chennai, in Varanasi, who are not so popular, but they are the best teachers who understand what the West really stands for. Now the Indian government, which claims to be a very pro traditions, they have to also put some effort. Now they're really doing something great, like the new education policy or something, but there are Indian think tanks seriously lacking. The land of Chanakya doesn't have a think tank, and which is very surprising. Takshila, Nalanda, the land, they don't have a think tank. We have to institutionally start questioning the West and changing the curriculum of the West. Then India will start changing. Like for example, I'll tell you, challenging Berkeley. Berkeley is not going to listen to your papers because they know the quality of research papers in India are junk. I know, many people know that they don't even come to the mark of 0.50 basis points also as compared to American. Even though American research papers are all garbage, but Indians are also copycats. They're mostly copies of other books. Or in fact, I was telling you, one of my books was totally in one research book paper. So they copied my whole book into that and produced as their own thesis. So the point is, which I'm trying to say, is that India being the land, we have the enough brain power, but the institutionally we have to start challenging. The moment we start de-recognizing the same thing which Chinese have learned from the US, same thing India has to learn from the US, sanction diplomacy. Start putting sanctions. And there is a very classical way. One American told me, if you want somebody to go there, make roads. If you don't want to have somebody go there, don't make roads. Very simple logic. So if you want to, where there is no road, you cannot go. You have to take an off-road vehicle, which is, which can be very expensive for somebody. So the point is, we have to stop building the sanction-based work. Once we start sanctioning Harvard Hindu Department, Berkeley Indology Studies, and attack and target the biggest institutions at a time, because these are the biggest fake news peddlers. They are the problem for the conservatives also, but for us they are a bigger problem. They are the ones, they are the caste theory peddlers, and they are the creators of critical faith theory, which is the main thing behind the critical race theory, and they are protecting it. See, understand, CRT is a camouflage for CFT.
Yeah, as the saying goes, like there has to be some motivating factor for what you do. कहीं पे निशाना, कहीं क्या है गाना वो, कहीं पे निगाहें कहीं पे निशाना, right?
That's right.
That is what is important for us to figure out, and for that is critical for us to do two things: our ancient knowledge of acquiring Purva Paksh, or the modern theory of understanding the nature of the beast.
The general IQ level of Indians is very high.
That's
Very, very high.
we are not suffering for lack of intelligence.
Yes.
We are not
It just
suffering
has to be guided.
Yes, but we have we have not got into the act. We still believe that Atithi is God, but didn't realize that he's coming to cut your throat. He's
Yeah.
not your thing. So applying the knowledge also with wisdom is key. So the point of the matter also remains is that we have talked about varieties of issues, and I say sanction. Why hasn't India taken an economic sanction route with Pakistan? I mean, my favorite phrase is, and I'm appealing to the government of India and External Affairs Ministry, we may not have a choice of neighbor. That's the statement that comes from there. Or we have no choice of neighbor. But of course you have choice of friends, right? De-link yourself with Pakistan completely. How many more times are we going to allow Ghazni to raid us? We know the history. And as the saying goes, if you do not learn from history, history is very ruthless. History is full of corpses of men who did not know and did not recognize the truth. That's what is important for us to figure out. Taking action is key. I would, this particular program has been, I have enjoyed having this conversation. I hope you guys have enjoyed. I will urge only two things from you. I'll end my conversation today here with Aditya ji with a quote from Aurobindo, but I will also implore upon all the viewers to just Google Sri Aurobindo's article, Bourgeois and the Samurai. That doesn't open your eyes and minds, then nothing will change you. And here is, I'm quoting Sri Aurobindo from the same article, that the solution to the problems of this kind he's referring to, which is relevant even today, has to be sought in abstractions, not machinery, but in men. It is the spirit in man which molds his fate. It is the spirit of the nation which determines its history. And that's what is critical for us to remember. So, with these words, I want to end the show today. Thank you very much for being here. Fortunately or unfortunately, there are no questions. So we'll cut the conversation over. Please support, subscribe, and okay, I have a question here from Krishna Sundar. Thank you. For most of the woke left, the Soviet Union is not an attractive model because it is more conventional and conservative. Bulgaria and Romania were unpleasant totalitarian prison states, but they were not engaging in the nuttiness like abolishing sexes. I mean, the Soviet Union is not as crazy as the American university campus. Your view, sir. Go ahead.
So first of all, you have to understand the Soviet model, which evolved from Tsar. And again, I always take you back to the critical faith theory. And critical faith theory, if you look at it, the Eastern Orthodoxy Church was a rebel against the Roman Catholic Church. Now, Roman Catholic Church was all for the wealth of Rome, and mostly Italian and French, because the Italy did not exist during that time. It was a Roman kingdom. But the Eastern Orthodoxy Church was for the wealth of the Moscow-based church. And Moscow, many parts of Moscow were Byzantine. And I can say all this in confidently because of my last book. Siberia is an acquired territory.
Why don't you name your last book, The Curse of the Natives, you are referring to?
Gold, Glory, and God, A Curse on the
Gold,
Natives.
Glory, and God. Okay. I thought Curse of the Natives was the last one.
Was the Curse on the Natives is the same book, but
Okay.
it's called Gold, Glory, and God,
Right.
A Curse on the Natives.
Right.
So it's available on Amazon. Now, if you look at the Siberia, so 70% of Russia is in occupied territory. 70%. And so you look at the entire Russian wealth side, Siberia to the Brent Sea and Pacific is all occupied territory to Alaska, to what is touching Alaska right now. So that territory was used by Russia to take the wealth out and send to the west part of Russia. Russia is a large country, a very big east-west spread, and to the European part of Russia. Now, that's the reason that the Russian model is very different than European model, because there is a large part of acquired territory with multiple faiths. Islam had already conquered the Central Asian states, and before 1991, all those territories were Soviet territories. And it's a Tsar kingdom manifesting. Now, if you can show the question again, one part of the question I forgot, I skipped.
Okay, please show the question again.
Yeah, yes, and that's why the Soviet Union model was built on Bolshevism, or the cottage industry, or the state-controlled resources. And the reason for that state-controlled resources was it was very difficult to govern the occupied territories, and therefore the Soviet model collapsed, because there was all the wealth was being used by the Moscow in the Western Europe, Western Russia, and that's why the other states were weakened. Most of the other states were ruled by the military. So but after 1991 Perestroika introduced a freedom amongst the Soviet states. So most of the states which were independent in the beginning, Lithuania, Latvia, Georgia, many Central Asian states, and they all became independent, Ukraine. So therefore the Soviet model failed completely, because there were some logic behind it. China model, if you look at it, became successful because they followed a Soviet model with an American capitalism. So China is a very mix of communism and capitalism. On economic side, they're capitalistic. On governance side, they're communistic.
So
I hope it answers.
By implication, India must bring about some models of Russia, China, and America. And
no, they have to come. They have to
establish their own. But
own.
the purpose of the lighter mood, maybe the whole world kept quiet when Xi declared himself president for lifelong part of it, right? Talking about occupied territories, even America is an expansion of occupation, right? So the question here is, how does India deal with it? That will be a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But suffice to say, and I quote back the same last sentence of Sri Aurobindo, the solution to the problems of this kind has to be sought in abstractions, not machinery, but in men. It is the spirit in man which molds his fate. It is the spirit of the nation which determines his history. That's the part which is very important. And we have to begin to learn to shape our own destiny and our own mind. And if you want to achieve that elevated equilibrium, then we have to question the basic assumptions, which is what we have been talking about. Assumptions, and question the integrity of the beliefs that we have adopted. So thank you very much for being with us. As I always say, Satyamev Jayate. Thank you very much, Aditya.
Thank you.
Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.